Have you ever wondered why two people can experience the exact same situation but walk away with two completely different realities? One person sees an opportunity, another sees a problem. One person sees rejection, another sees redirection. The situation can be exactly the same, so why does their experience feel completely different? Well, neuroscience shows that the difference isn't always the world around them. It's the identity they use to perceive the world. And I know this because I've experienced it myself. For years, I felt stuck, unlucky, and like a victim of my circumstances. I struggled with depression and anxiety, believing my life was being shaped by everything happening around me. But over time, I realized many of the things keeping me stuck weren't just my circumstances. They were the way I was perceiving them through the identity and beliefs that I had about myself. And so in this video, we're going to explore the neuroscience behind identity, why your brain filters reality, and how your identity shapes the world you experience. So let's dive right in. But every second, your brain is receiving far more information than it could ever consciously process. For example, just look around you right now. The sights around you, the objects, the smells, the sensations, people talking. There is literally so much going on in our external world. And so because of this, your brain has to filter reality and decide what information is important enough to pay attention to. And so the reason your brain filters reality is because it's trying to be efficient, right? Just think about it from a survival perspective, but your brain cannot afford to consciously try and analyze every single bit of information around you at all times. There is just simply too much information coming in. And so in order to decide what information is important to pay attention to, what you have to understand is that your brain is a prediction machine, and it is constantly making predictions about the world around you based on your past experiences, beliefs, and memories. Right, in order to be efficient, like I explained before, your brain relies on patterns that it has already learned to guide your attention, your decisions, and your behaviors. Now, the problem is that these predictions aren't always accurate because your brain isn't predicting based on objective reality, but it's predicting based on the patterns and beliefs that it has learned over time. And one of the strongest patterns that your brain uses is your identity, which is the beliefs and assumptions you have about who you are. And so, for example, if your brain has developed the identity of I'm not good enough, or I'm an unlucky person, or I'm someone who just never succeeds, well, your brain will literally start filtering your experiences through that lens. So let's imagine someone who has a negative identity makes a mistake at work. Well, their brain might immediately focus on that mistake as proof that they're not capable. And so now they completely overlook the times that they've succeeded, or the positive feedback they've received, or the progress that they've made. And so this person's brain is actively creating their perception of reality based on what their brain expects to see. And this explains why two people can go through the same situation but walk away with two completely different realities. They both might get rejected from the same job, and one thinks, this proves I'm not capable. I knew I wasn't smart enough. Whereas the other person might think, oh, there's so many more opportunities out there. I know I can improve for next time. The situation was the same, but their brain interpreted it in completely different ways. So I hope you are starting to understand that your brain isn't giving you a completely objective view of reality, but it's actively creating your perception of reality based on your experiences, beliefs, and the identity you hold about yourself. And I'm speaking from personal experience as someone who used to have such a negative identity. I used to have such low self-esteem and always believed that I wasn't good enough, that I'm stupid, that I'm worthless. And every time in school that I got something wrong, or someone told me off, or that something bad happened, I would use that experience as evidence to confirm my own belief. If someone didn't choose me to be on their team, I would immediately think, oh, they don't like me. If someone was upset or having a bad day, and they were interacting weirdly with me, I would immediately make it about me and think that there was something wrong with me. But now I've done so much work on myself and I've changed my beliefs that even when I am faced with rejections or failures, which is honestly very often because this is just life, I don't take those things personally. In fact, I've shared this before on my channel, but I asked a guy out and he said no, and my old identity would have took that so to heart In fact, my old identity wouldn't have even done that, but my old identity would have took that failure, that rejection, as it means something bad about me. But my new identity, I was just so proud of myself because I see myself as a capable person. I'm like, oh, look at me putting myself out there. So many more opportunities out there. Another quick example is building my business. There have been so many times when I've failed at something, or maybe I've started talking to a client and they don't want to go ahead. And my old identity would have seen that as proof that I'm not capable and that I'm failing. But my new identity, who sees myself as capable, instead of seeing that as evidence that things aren't working, I see it as evidence that people are paying attention. I see it as evidence that people are reaching out. And so I think to myself, whoa, this is working. There's so many new things I can try. Your identity and what you believe about yourself literally shapes your reality. And this isn't theory, but researchers have studied how people's beliefs influence what they notice in the world around them. So there was a study done by Richard Wiseman. So he had two groups of people, and the first group, they saw themselves as lucky. Whereas in the second group, they saw themselves as unlucky. And what he did is he asked both the groups to count the numbers of photographs in a newspaper. But hidden inside the newspaper was a large message offering a reward. And so, surprise, surprise, what he found is that the people who considered themselves lucky were much more likely to notice the message. Whereas many of the people who considered themselves unlucky completely missed it. And so the important finding here is that the unlucky people weren't necessarily living in a world with fewer opportunities, but their brains were filtering information differently because their attention was focused on what they expected to find. And so the reason I wanted to make this video is because so many people go through life simply believing that the world is happening to them. You know, they believe that they are unlucky, or their circumstances are the reason that they are stuck, or that they are unlovable, or that they have no control over their life. But whilst our circumstances do shape us, we also experience the world through the lens of our identity. Now, this isn't to say that your external circumstances don't matter at all. Because of course we live in an unfair world, but the problem begins when we take an experience and turn it into a belief about who we are. Because once that belief becomes part of our identity, well, your brain starts filtering reality through that lens, noticing evidence that confirms it and ignoring evidence that challenges it. For example, let's imagine someone who gets cheated on in a relationship. Of course, that experience is painful, and it's completely understandable that it will affect how they see relationships. But the problem begins when their brain turns that experience into a belief about themselves. For example, I'm not enough, or I can't trust anyone, or I'm always going to get hurt. Because now their brain starts looking for evidence to support it. You know, they might focus on signs that they are unlovable. You know, someone might not like their Instagram profile picture and they immediately think that they're not good enough. Or someone might not message them back in a certain amount of time and they interpret that as rejection. Or they overlook the evidence that someone is actually trustworthy. And so the identity built from that experience can begin shaping how they perceive every future situation. And so if you have a negative identity where you believe things don't work out for me, or I am not good enough, or I am just always unlucky, your brain becomes more likely to notice evidence that supports that belief and overlook evidence that challenges it. And so I have a little exercise for you. But next time something happens that feels negative, I want you to pause and ask yourself, am I seeing this situation as it actually is? Or am I interpreting it through a belief I already have about myself? Because the first step to breaking this pattern is awareness, right? Because you can't change a pattern that you don't see. And so you may have heard of this quote before, but it says, we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. You think you are seeing reality exactly as it is, but you're always seeing it through the lens of your experiences, your beliefs, and the identity that you hold about yourself. Your brain is a prediction machine, and those predictions are not always right. And so if you want to learn how to change your identity, click this video where I break down 3 simple steps to shift your identity and become someone new. I hope this video made you think differently. All the best.